Hi, my name is Tom Deegan, and I'd like to welcome you to this short video about Oklahoma school finance. This is part of two videos, part one of two videos, that is, about Oklahoma school finance. This video is about the revenue side. Where do we receive our money as school districts? And the other one is about budgeting and expenditures. Now, I've taught Oklahoma school finance for 15 years or so in Texas and Oklahoma to future superintendents, principals, trained superintendents, board members. And what I've discovered, it doesn't matter where you are, if you understand some key concepts about school finance, it makes everything more understandable, demystifies the whole concept. So whether you're a board member or a new principal or a new superintendent trying to really understand the fundamentals, or you're looking for tools to teach your people either in your class or your district so they understand school finance better, I think you'll find out the concepts in these two videos will really help clarify things for just about everybody. The first concept everybody needs to understand about school finance is it's based on the concept of equity, not the politicized version of equity that we hear about, but simply this concept that's federal, and we model the federal government when it comes to school funding. And state school funding is simply based on ensuring equity among students, schools, districts, and communities, meaning one school, one district has the same basic funding level per student or as a group as any other in the state. And that is the concept. Remember, it's not a politicized version of it. It's just making sure that funding is similar among districts, students, and groups. Now, to understand this, really, we have to look at the federal mindset. I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger. When it comes to the federal mindset, which most states follow this mindset, there are two opposing federal mindsets when it comes to equity. The Title I mindset, which we often think of as free and reduced lunches, economically disadvantaged. This is about creating equity among groups, meaning we want this group of children to have the same amount of funding as this group of children, considering different factors. This may be district to district, school to school. It's about equity among groups. Remember, Title I is a whole different program, but that's the mindset of Title I. The other mindset is the IDEA, which is the special ed mindset, which is about equity for the individual child. IDEA and special ed doesn't care about groups. It's all about that individual child and his or her IEP. And so therefore, if you understand that there's two lenses of equity, one about groups and one about the individual child, I think it helps you understand this whole broad concept of equity in schools. Just trying to ensure there's some sort of rationale for the funding among groups and among districts. And that's how all school finance that I'm aware of in the United States, at least, is based. Now, there are three rules in the state of Oklahoma that help you understand school finance, and I really believe they translate to most states in the district as well. The first one is pretty simple, pretty evident. More kids, more money, and that is the concept. If you have 1,000 students, you're going to receive more funding than a district or a school that has 500 students. Pretty simple, but I don't hear a lot of people putting it that way. That's why I've created Deegan's 3 rules of school finance. Rule number 2. Now, the more challenging to educate, the more funding. So rule number 2, take, for example, a student in a wheelchair. A student with a wheelchair is going to take more resources. We're going to have to build a ramp. We may have to, by law, require that, provide that student with the wheelchair. So a student that requires more resources, is more challenged to educate, is going to receive more funding. And then rule number 3, pretty standard in most states. So this doesn't apply to Oklahoma charters in most cases. The more local funding you receive, the less state funding provided. That's why in the state of Oklahoma, you can have a district, for example, that has a power plant or gas plants or a major industry that receives so much local revenue from their ad valorem and their chargeables, etc., that they don't receive any state funding. We're not like some states, or Texas, for example, they take away your local funding. Nope, in Oklahoma, we just simply make sure you don't receive any extras. And so that's the concept of trying to make sure that districts are funding in an equitable manner. Now, there is a wild card that we don't talk about lots in schools, and that is what I call the local wild card. This comes with bond initiatives where your community comes together and they vote to go over and above what's required by the law and add property taxes to fund a building example. That's why you can be in one district a few miles away from another that will have just wildly different quality of buildings because the local community, in most cases, has floated a bond or passed a bond so they can update their facilities. You can't build a building out of your building fund in the state of Oklahoma. The other wild card is fundraising. And this one, this you see more often in districts that have many schools. And you'll see one elementary school just a few blocks away from another elementary school has an amazing playground, for example. Well, that's because you can't use Title I funding for playground. And quite often they have an active parent-teacher organization that raised money. So fundraising and bonds are the wild card. In most cases, they don't count against you in any possible way with your state funding. So if you look at these three rules that we've talked about, school revenue simplified, the first, you've just got to understand that there are two mindsets when it comes to equity. Equity among groups of children. You can see this in different programs that are not Title I. You can see this on the state level. For example, you can see a school district that is very isolated will get more funding from the state because it costs more to bus those students. That's the concept we're talking about. And then there's the IDEA funding, which means individual children need different funding. And that's with special ed. You can see it with gifted and talented as well. Those are the two mindsets. And then on the state level, this is how they're applied. More students, more funding. Simple. More challenge to educate, more money. And the third one, the more local funding, the less state funding you're going to receive in the state of Oklahoma. We call this chargeables. So when you hear the word chargeables, that is what we're talking about. And again, charters don't necessarily have to worry about that. It's just rule number one and rule number two. So there are two key concepts that I'm covering when it comes to simplifying school finance. This is the first one, revenue. The next one is budgeting and expenditures. And I hope you'll join me for that video too as I break it down. And if you have any questions for me or you need to visit with me, I'd love to. This is my cell phone number and my email address. God bless you and thank you for joining in this short video.